Yeah.
We make shapes. That's the hardest.
Yeah. No, but we pay somebody to
right. Someone
make
tells
the shapes,
us how to
and
make the shape.
we just follow their instructions.
Oh my goodness. Hello everyone and welcome to the Marching Arts Podcast, your guide to all things marching. Today with us we have a professional marcher, in my opinion, who has been at all levels of marching. Went through high school, went to college at Kennesaw State. That's where we met her. And then she marched in DCI and then came back to march at the university level. She's fantastic, has a ton of knowledge, and her name is Juliana Thomas.
Hey.
Welcome.
Happy to be here.
Are you sure?
Positive.
Okay.
Not COVID positive, I assume. I hope.
Oh, no.
Surprise.
And negative.
Surprise. So, to kind of kick us off here and let us know a little bit about yourself, what got you into marching band from the start, and what kind of drove you to go into drum corps?
So, I started marching band, or I started band when I was in 6th grade. When you're a 5th grader, they bring you in early and they give you a test of all the instruments, and I could make a noise in the brass instruments. And my mom was there. And I said, "Mom, I want to play violin." And she said, "That's not a band instrument. You're going to be in band."
Your mom's a good woman.
Your mom made a good choice.
She made a great choice. I'm also a triplet, so whatever my brothers did, they were also in band. I did too. So I played the French horn. Brothers played other brass instruments like the trumpet and the euphonium. So together we were like almost a brass trio.
You could have had like a family band.
You could have.
We did every Christmas actually.
Oh, okay.
Oh. Is there an album?
A mixtape.
Are you dropping it today on the podcast?
Is it dropping today?
Drops today, yeah. So that's kind of how I started band, and then marching band was just the natural progression from middle school into high school. My big brother did it, so therefore I had to do it. I loved it, but I didn't really consider marching band seriously until sophomore year, when you get a little bit of the sophomore syndrome going. For those of you who don't know, sophomore syndrome is when you do something new for the first time, and then the next time you do it, you think you know a lot about it because you've done it before, right? As a sophomore coming in, I've done marching band. I know what a dot is. I know what 8 to 5 is. Therefore, I can tell all the freshmen all about it and order them around.
More is a wise fool, after all.
Yes, absolutely. While your upperclassmen just want you to, be quiet while they give the actual instructions.
Right.
So my sophomore year I came back with a little bit of sophomore syndrome. But also, this other guy in my section, the mellophone section, came back from his first year at the cadets.
Okay.
And he just came back, and he didn't say anything. He was a quiet guy, but he came back with this instilled confidence and excellence. His stuff was always perfect. He was always on time. His horn stack was always A1. He came back, and I said, "I want to be like that."
You want to be like steak sauce? A1 steak sauce?
Absolutely.
Okay. Not sponsored, by the way. Unless.
Steak sauce, it is up.
So, that's a good point to make. I mean, there's a very large difference between what happens at a high school level and happens at a drum corps or national level. And I mean, and people have different things that they want to accomplish at the high school level. If they're in a competitive band, they're wanting to come back with trophies, tell all their friends, and Mama's proud of little Timmy for getting the trophy. But people want different things out of it. For you, being in drum corps and making that transition, you saw somebody that had, excellence and it was just beaming confidence when they came back. So can you talk a little bit about when you saw that, did that set an expectation for you, or what did you hope to get out of it?
So I learned in the competitive high school marching band environment that being good is a lot of fun. You can have fun, and you can be good, but doing both is a lot of hard work, and there's a very fine line. It's balance.
Right.
And that's what he came back, and he wasn't telling everybody about how great drum corps was, or about his experiences or his stories. He just came back and did his thing, did what he wanted to do. And I think that speaks volumes, because a lot of people come back from those experiences like I did, and they don't shut up about drum corps for the next 6 months.
They get sophomore syndrome, except about drum corps to high school.
And
Exactly.
I would say, like, that's not necessarily bad because, like, you do want to advocate for DCI and just showing, like, hey, this is this awesome thing that I did and I had such an amazing time. But, like, when that line gets crossed is like, oh, I'm better than you.
Right.
And you, like, do see some of those people come out like, I'm better than you. Like, you, like, are lucky that I'm still in this program. I'm still doing high school or still doing college instead of only doing DCI. So, like, yeah, I do see that sometimes that line does get crossed.
Right. And you've got to just maintain the heart. At the end of the day, like, we are sitting here playing instruments and waving our arms around on a floating rock in space. Like, that's just, that's abstract.
That's actually a plate. Topic for a different episode.
But what doesn't change is these are people. They've got their own stories, their own hardships. They're here finding community in band and bettering themselves every single day. Learning new skills, learning time management. Drum corps is really good at doing that. It really stresses your ability to get things done in a certain amount of time because things always go wrong, and at the end of the day you'll never look at a drum corps and say that person over there, the top of that triangle, they were late to bus and seat. They didn't have their hair done correctly because it gets fixed and it gets done.
Right.
So it's problem solving. It's a lot of growing up, so to speak, in a short period of time.
Yeah. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but you marched with Boston Crusaders, right? Did you march with anybody else or, like, audition with anybody else?
I auditioned for the cadets
and
for
when was
3
this?
years. So I marched in 16.
Okay.
And then starting...
1916?
That's a long time ago.
1916.
I didn't think DCI was around at
You're
1916.
looking good for 1916.
Yeah, right?
Got olive oil on my skin on avocado. It works wonders, guys.
Okay.
Brought to you by Haas, but not really.
Another not sponsor, unless.
So you marched 2016.
I marched in 2016. In the previous 2 years, I auditioned for the cadets. In the first year, I did not make it, got a call back. The second year, I did make it, but did not march. I was not financially ready for thousands of dollars leaving my bank account.
Right, and I think it's a good point to bring up because, like, some people may not know that it is thousands of dollars and, like,
It's
they
expensive.
show up to spring training or, like, just auditions and you're like, I'm ready to do this, and then you see, you know, the booklet and it's like, hey, it's a $3,600, you know, plus.
Commitment, yeah.
Yeah, so you're like, oh, so I'm so glad I found this out now, or, like, we're glad that you're sharing that information here on the podcast so people are just aware that, yes, there is a huge financial commitment.
Well, even the big number, $3,600 is what I paid when I marched in 16. At the end of the day,
Just guess that.
Yeah, no, it was right on. At the end of the day, I spent $4,100.
Wow.
Because during the summer, food and travel is provided mostly, but you still need things like, oh, my sleeping bag has a hole in it now, or it's just trashed.
So instead of doing cadets and, like, not marching with them that year, so how did it then transition to Boston?
So 2016, I auditioned for both cadets and Boston, made both corps, and had to make a choice. I chose Boston over cadets because I vibed with the culture a lot more. The cadets have a very, I know you guys don't like cussing, but they're hard asses, to say it very bluntly. And they were comprised of an older young adult, because it's age gapped, but their average age, I think, I want to say, was 20. And they're a great corps and a great group of people, but they did not resonate with me. And at the end of the day, I chose Boston because I immediately clicked with everybody there. We were all a bunch of younger, newer people to the marching arts, and we all just kind of grew and learned together.
Oh, that's
and
pretty
that's really
cool.
special.
And that's something to say because, I mean, across the board, I mean, you know, it doesn't matter what kind of, you know, group you're in, whether it be, you know, indoor drumline, you know, anything WGI, DCA. I mean, if you're in a, you know, an environment where you're not getting along with anybody, is that worth it for you to do?
Some people would say yes, but, like, most people, I agree, would probably be like, no, I need to have fun. Like, my only goal isn't to be the best of the best. I want to, you know, enjoy being the best of the best.
And to me, I mean, you know, that kind of, you know, who takes responsibility for that kind of thing, right? So for me, you know, since marching band, you know, I think we're all three of us are kind of under the pretense that marching band really starts at the end of 8th grade going into 9th grade, in most cases. Right. So to me, it kind of falls on those high school directors that have those, that have a formed marching band to kind of cultivate that to allow their students to want to come back. Because there's also a lot of programs out there where, the director themselves are super hard asses. So these kids are walking into a super strict environment and they don't want to continue to do that because, we talked about this before about, trying to balance work and life. You don't want this band aspect that you were just trying to have fun with to become work now.
Right.
So it's something to be said that you could have gone one way but chose to go another because of vibes.
Right.
Right.
So
off topic or not, slight tangent, but like, did your director ever like bring up DCI in high school?
Yeah. So my director, Patrick Irwin, in high school, he marched Cavaliers. And he taught Cavaliers in the early 2000s. Okay. So our very first video of, hey kids, you want to know what marching band is like? He slaps on the machine from the Cavaliers. I think it's a 2005 show. Slaps that on and just wows us. We're like, whoa, what was that? That was so weird. And hello.
Oh, look, a random cat.
So my band was exposed to DCI from day one. We didn't know what it was, but we knew it was really cool.
Okay.
And I think it's easy to get exposure now because everything's on YouTube, and you can just search at YouTube Space Chords from the Blue Devils video, and then just get wowed immediately and get immersed.
So, kind of following that, you said it was going to be off track, but I don't think we really got super off track. You've talked a lot about some great experience that you had with the things you can get out of core and DCI and the people that you meet and all the kind of culture that you form with those people. But overall with that, what are some of your favorite things about it, but also what are some of your least favorite things about it as well when you had your time there?
I think I'm excited to see the change in DCI as our culture changes and is less about do what I say when I say it and really about creating a learning experience, because that's where DCI is going for the individuals. Because at the end of the day, I mean, when you're in it, you're competitive and you want to beat SCV, you want to beat the cadets, you want to beat all these other corps. But then after that's over, it's like a big family, and we're just glad to have shared similar experiences. And I say that coming from the kind of teachers and the kind of directors, not core directors, but brass directors, who would make us run timed miles at 180 BPM because we fracked a note and missed instructions.
Wow.
Stuff like that is pretty common in DCI. I've heard stories from members at the cadets who wouldn't follow instructions, missed a beat, and then they'd have to say, okay, see that telephone pole, go run and touch it. And they would use kind of almost a physical punishment to punish a mental tick. And that happens where you miss instructions sometimes. Sometimes you were immature and you're talking when you weren't supposed to be talking. And so they kind of had to figure out a punishment for that. But I think we're changing from kind of a beat down culture into let's take 5 minutes, everybody. If we're missing a lot of instructions, let's take 5 minutes, relax, rest a second, and let's jump back in. Because it's a skill to learn in order to talk with your friends and then cross that line onto the field and then immediately jump into, okay, now I am a performer and I need to shed everything else and kind of just focus on what I need to be doing, counting, breathing, playing.
So let's get into like hazing, because that's something everybody knows about, maybe not want to talk about it, but here we want all of our listeners to get the full experience of all aspects of the marching arts. So like, do you have any experience with hazing? Maybe not like you yourself were doing it, but like surely you've heard of it or like maybe even seen it.
Yeah, at the high school and college level, I've experienced no hazing. No talk about hazing. There is explicitly absolutely no hazing involved in any of the programs I've done, except drum corps. It's not talked about, but they do have forms of hazing. For sure. And they're not anymore. I've heard stories about them being illegal, but my friends at the Cavies went through hazing. Theirs was not optional. Boston Crusaders had hazing. It was optional. And it was done very hush-hush on the bus. I did not participate in it, but it was the kind of thing where it was like a talent show and you get to choose your talent. So some people sang. I don't have any other talents but band, so I did not participate. But people they did like a little dance. Some people did almost like a stand-up comedy. Like they just told jokes to the bus, and it's all like curtained off, and so it wasn't anything terribly explicit or terrible.
Or dark.
Yeah. But it did happen, and that was just something that happened on the bus. Other corps are completely against it, but I do know that some of them, like the Cavies, I've heard stories, and cadets have had hazing in the past. And the culture around hazing is we want to shut it down, because you're a part of the corps day one. Nothing, if you make it through spring training, nothing can take that away from you. You're going to be a part of the corps, get the corps necklace, shoestring, medallion, ring, whatever your corps does. And that's what your summer experience is all about. You are a blank, a crusader, a cadet. I don't know what the other corps call themselves. But I'm sorry. But that's what it boils down to. And it does happen. But I think it's happening a lot less now, which is really, really good.
Yeah, and it's good to talk about it again for full disclosure, but also, for people that walk into these, you need to be aware of these kind of things. That the only way to stop hazing is to call it out when it happens. So don't be afraid to talk to somebody and tell them that you see it happen.
Right.
So.
It's okay to communicate that with your staff, your corps director, because their number one priority is you. They're there for you, for your safety, for everyone's safety. And don't lose sight of that fact.
Absolutely.
So if you're uncomfortable with something, absolutely communicate to somebody, to staff, to your directors. You can communicate to people in the corps as well, to your section mates, but absolutely escalate it when it needs to be escalated. Yeah. I know that, especially nowadays, people are listening and people care, and they're not going to shove you under a rug.
So with that kind of mindset, because I think that's an important thing as well. Somebody that's looking to get into the band world, you develop friends and you develop these relationships with people that you're sharing a common goal with. But then it's like once you cross that line, whether it be Friday Night Lights or a competition, when you cross over onto the field, it's like a whole different world. I mean, at least for me personally, it feels like. It's like this is all about me now. Like I have to do my best, otherwise the people next to me won't have, as good of a performance. At least that's how I feel about it. But, as somebody that's, getting into it or someone that is new to it, it's hard to think about how to get through that physically. Because it's such an ask, like when you're not used to doing it. There's a study, I forget what year it was, but they did a study where they put a heart rate monitor on a Blue Devil snare drummer,
right?
And it got above that of like NFL athletes,
right?
It got 280 beats per minute. And in fact, when they played the show, when he wasn't even doing anything, his heart rate spiked immediately. Yeah. I also saw that same study. Yeah,
it was really cool. It's really, really interesting. And for those that say, marching band is not a sport, you're wrong. But
that's a hot take.
Yeah, well, I'll stand by my hot take because it's a sport. But how, what advice would you guys give to somebody that's getting into it or even is experienced in it to kind of like push through physical and those mental barriers of like, I mean, because sometimes, you know, what is 95 degrees outside on blacktop if you practice on blacktop? It's more like 120. Yeah, so it's like, you know, how do you push through that? Because
you've seen videos of like cores practicing in like swimming pools because it's just like so dang hot.
Right.
And I guess it also helps your lungs because like you have the water pressure pushing against your lungs. So I guess you get like a double benefit, but like, yeah.
That sounds cool. I never did that though. Yeah. It was 120 degrees on the AstroTurf in Texas in July while we were there. Got so hot to the point where our medical staff jumped in and said, you guys can't practice anymore, take a siesta, which is an afternoon break. So we did because people were dropping.
Right.
Because heat will affect you. I think the biggest thing for people in the activity or people who want to get into it is it's a great place to find community and also to challenge yourself. But you have to make sure you find balance between pushing yourself and listening to your body. Because at some point your body's going to say, hey, whoa, this is a lot. When in reality, you actually have a lot more in the tank. So in drum corps, we call it spring training, the wall. 7 days into spring training, 7 to 10 typically, you hit a wall when you're like, I can't do this anymore. This is so tough. My body is sore all the time. And I don't know what to do. I don't have any more energy to give. And people listen to their bodies, would go home, and we would not see them again. But if you push past that wall, then you actually are totally fine, and you get used to being sore all the time. And it's just a new way of living, because your body adapts. Now I'm saying balance is important too, because at some point, you know, if you pull a muscle, if you tear your AC, you know, if you go through an injury, or you've got other things going on behind the scenes, you need to listen to your body. You need to be able to take a step back and say, this is actually really dangerous for me and I need to stop.
So when you know, talk about going through spring training and going past the wall, I mean, so you experienced that firsthand with being your first experience with corps, or were you kind of watched your friend when you saw them in high school come back for? Did you kind of like prepare yourself before getting prepared?
I mean, we go through a lot of physical training before you go to drum corps. You're supposed to be running and doing push-ups and trying to train your body into getting stressed physically. But nothing can prepare you for 12-hour days. 12 hours of rehearsal, not including any lunch breaks or anything else like that. 12 hours of guzzling down water and holding pee in until you get a pee break. We got yelled at for that.
That would be hard.
I mean, so it's you can prepare as much as possible, but nothing prepares your mind and your spirit for that kind of just test and the stress. But it's possible.
Yeah, would you say that like your spring training is pretty comparable to all the other spring trainings out there? So like if somebody was watching this podcast and they heard about your story, they could expect that at other corps, or do you think some corps do their spring trainings differently? Or do all corps, I'm sure all corps do have that wall, but like do you think like other corps might hit that wall earlier than other corps?
Yeah, I think for every corps and every individual is different, but you will hit a wall in spring training. Some corps, we stayed on the gym floor, just like we did over tour, so that kind of wore us out a little sooner, because some corps get to sleep in dorm rooms with beds, and it's a slightly different experience, slightly more luxurious experience for sure.
You saying a dorm is luxurious? That's funny.
It is. After you've been in over 100 high school gym floors, they're all roughly the same. They all have cockroaches, and they all have that terrible white noise.
That's a mental challenge as well. Just like you're coming from your home, which you're used to. You probably have nice-ish, facilities to use to take care of yourself, and then now all of a sudden you're just whisked away, and for like the next 120 days about. You're just constantly...
I think tour is like 88 days. 88
days. You're just constantly on the move, so you're never getting comfortable. And then you have to deal with, like, just not the best facilities.
Yeah. You feel like a fish out of water, but then you find out that you're really adaptable anyways. So I had a shower buddy named Megan, and typically if we were in the bathroom the same time and showering and stuff, we would throw on some Disney tunes on her speaker and then just jam out and shower, because it forces you to be very comfortable in your own skin, or at least challenges you to be very comfortable in your own skin, because I mean, at the end of the day, you've got to shower. So do 20 other people. There's only 4 shower heads, so you got to like make it work. Go in, go out, lather, you step out, someone else rinses. Just kind of get this system going. And I think that was a really cool experience because after the first 2 days, you realize no one else cares, no one else is looking at you, and you can just do your thing. And that's really nice. Like, that's a nice confidence builder. In addition to all of the posture work and everything else that we do to like kind of build yourself up for the marching band look.
And so, like, you brought up podium crew, but like explain, like, because our listeners may not understand that, once you like get past high school, there's no like more parents to help out with doing.
There's not a
like,
booster club.
Yeah, there's no like pit crew, or if like there is a pit crew, it's all like students, or so like, can you just explain, like, you guys really do everything for yourselves, right?
Right. So in high school, you get the benefit of band moms and dads, and they help with building the props, and they help on show days, bring things places. They want to make sure that you have a water bottle when you're feeling thirsty. Like, they are so nice. Thank you, all the band moms out there and dads. Y'all are great. So when you get to college and or DCI, they are not there. You do have volunteers in the food truck, and you do have volunteers running around trying to make logistics happen, but at the end of the day, it's everyone around you in your core that's helping things get done. Your props need to get moved. You've got a prop crew of people who are going to move those props every morning, every evening. You got a scaffolding crew going to build up the towers for staff to stand on so they can look at you guys in the forms while you're doing visual block. So I was on podium crew, so the podiums the drum major stood on, I got to lug around every day. And it was a point of pride, honestly. I was the only girl on the crew.
There you go.
So, yeah, super tough. But if you get a choice to choose your tour job, I've heard through the grapevine that field crew is the best. You line the fields in the morning because a lot of the surfaces you practice on aren't lined or aren't lined correctly. Let's say they've got high school hashes and you need to have the professional NFL hashes. So there are a lot of different jobs, and they all come with their own quirks and challenges, and that's just another thing you get to add to your basket of fun when you do drum corps.
Lots of fun things for Drum Corps International.
Can I ask you something silly?
Of course.
How many pairs of socks would you say you go through a day? Or did you only go through one pair of socks a day?
I try to keep it at 1 or 2 a day.
Uh-huh.
Because stinky socks are disgusting,
Right.
and if you wear them for 6 or 12 hours, it doesn't change the stink factor.
Especially if, like, the grass is wet in the morning, right? Well, I guess
Yeah, but then your feet get sweaty, and
right, and just...
it's no problem.
It's no problem.
It's no problem.
I would say if you have a problem with sweaty feet and blister management and blister control, definitely change your socks out more often than not. Unfortunately, corps usually do laundry once every 2 weeks, sometimes once a week if you're very lucky. I think they're trying to improve that as the years go on, they're trying to improve the member comfortability.
Right.
So maybe more free days are added in, maybe more free half days or laundry days. But I would pack and get used to not doing laundry for 2 weeks, just to be safe.
I think we should stop this podcast and start a laundry service for DCI.
Yeah, right, yeah, we'll do a traveling laundromat.
Yeah, I'm sure those exist.
But kind of to backpedal a little bit, since I tend to do that a lot apparently. So, in the college life, right, the average life of a marcher in a college band is 2 years. So
They only live 2 years?
Wow.
Shh, don't tell them that. They stay in marching band for 2 years.
I did not know
But there's some at that level that are also entertaining doing DCI and drum corps. In that capacity, to you as someone who did both, to be able to bounce back and forth between the two totally different styles of marching, is it worth it to bounce back and forth like that between seasons? Because for DCI, for those that don't know, DCI happens largely in the summer. The tour happens over the summer, and the finals happen right before most schools start, or some of them have already started when finals for DCI finals happen. And within those times, college bands will have their band camps and start their normal seasons at the end of that. So people that do both are going straight from an 88-day tour directly into a whole season of marching band again. So, I mean, is it worth it?
I think it depends on what you're in band for. And this also goes to people looking at doing DCI, going back into a competitive high school marching band. Because, again, those are also night and day different. And you're going to have to meet the band where they're at. They're on day one.
Right.
You're on day 120, but they're on day one. And so it's going to be a whole different monster for you, kind of maybe withdrawing some of your comments, remarks, because you can see, the problems with one marcher or the direction of the band. You just kind of have to relax and let them do their thing and just worry about doing yours. Just worry about yourself. Is my horn clean? Am I learning all my dots? Is anybody asking for my help? Because jumping from DCI into college marching band, it kind of saw is we want to do a good job, but mostly it's about having fun. You're there to entertain. That is the purpose of Kennesaw's band. And I lost that when I first came back. I was a complete jerk to everybody. I didn't mean to be, but our lines could have been just really, really straight. If you're like, oh, you're a quarter step off this way. I could just see that because that's where I came from, and
right.
The lines needed to be absolute perfection.
Right.
I'm not saying we're not striving for the highest at a college level, but it's a different monster. It's a completely different game. So if you're going to do different bands, DCI in high school, DCI in college, you need to understand and approach that they might have different purposes than DCI, and that they're on day one and they're going to do a completely different thing.
So you need to manage your expectations a little bit.
Exactly.
Okay.
I think just telling people when you get back, hey, just march DCI. It might be a hard ass for a little bit, but don't worry. Once I get back into the groove of things, then I'll be back to the person that you used to know. Because I do feel like communicating with people is always basically the best way to just make sure things don't boil over.
Absolutely, communication is definitely the best.
And just in all aspects of life, not just in band.
What?
Yeah.
What?
You have to communicate.
Yeah.
You mean to my roommate?
I mean, yeah, probably.
That's your personal choice.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I don't like to talk to James very much.
Yeah, we only do this podcast,
This is the only time I ever speak to him ever. So, we've talked a lot about the great things about DCI. We've talked a lot about the experiences, things you can learn, new habits you get, new skills you can bring back to the table at your home band. But what are some things, why people shouldn't do it? What would be things that, why wouldn't you do DCI, if that makes sense?
I think two things come to mind. One of them is if you're not at a place, let's say musically you're excellent, but let's say you have a lot of growing up to do mentally. You're not in a place where you can manage yourself, manage your time, and you require other people, or you're leaning on other people to kind of pick up your slack. And I think that DCI would challenge you, but if you're really immature, it would be a really tough transition for you into drum corps.
Yeah, it's a very individualized kind of effort, right? Because in high school, and we've talked about this, that in high school, there's a good mix of people that are like, oh, I think band is cool, so I'm going to do it. And there's a mix of people like, my mom said I have to do band, so here I am. So they're not really putting forth their effort. In college, I would say 90% of the people in the band wanted to be in it, depending on the program you go to. And then you always have the people that are joining just because their friends are in it, and they're not putting their forth. But at the DCI level, everyone there paid a bunch of money and auditioned to be there. So it's very individualized. So I think I very much agree with you. If you have trouble maintaining your expectations about yourself and like you said, you require others to kind of steer you in the right direction, you know, you're going to be too busy. It moves too fast. You know, they're not going to be able to you know, caddy you along with that. So I think I agree. You know, if you don't have a strong mental fortitude, it probably wouldn't be right for you.
And you'd probably say, like, be prepared to get knocked down a couple pegs, right? Because, like, most people are probably the best, you know, performers at their high school or maybe even their college band, but then you show up to DCI, and especially if it's your first season, and you're like, oh, I made the core, I'm so good, and then you, like, find out how good the actual veterans are, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
It definitely humbles you a little bit, and it reminds me of the Dunning-Kruger effect, honestly.
Explain that for our listeners.
So, the Dunning-Kruger effect basically has to deal with confidence and knowledge. So when you first do something and you learn a new skill, you're like, okay, I'm getting pretty good at this. I'm getting pretty good. Now I can play concert Fs with no fracking, no problem. They're actually really, really close to being in tune. This is awesome. Like, I'm so good. And so your confidence goes up, right? And then you learn about the other 11 notes.
You're like, oh,
wait, I play more than just concert F?
and then it goes right back down, and your confidence goes down, and then you're kind of just climbing over time to get back towards being more confident. So it's experts in their field. That's kind of how they start. Wow, I did marching band for a year. I think I know everything. And then you get back down into the nitty gritty of, wow, how big a step size is and why your horn should be pointed 35 degrees. Is it up or in?
Up and in, right?
Up and in.
Yeah.
It depends on which the effect you're
where
going for.
you are on the field.
And
exactly.
the sound you're going for.
And then you kind of get down into that and all the technicalities, and your confidence goes down again because you're like, there's so much I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of in a roundabout way, we're getting back to the story of, you know, making sure that you can handle drum corps, that you are ready for that challenge. So kind of continuing this conversation about maturity and everything, what do y'all think about DCI's age limit, you know, being from X years old to 21?
I mean, I think it needs to be higher because I think the entry needs to be higher. I think, you know, and the age out limit needs to be higher because, I mean, you know, being like a freshman in high school and then you're marching around with people that are like in college or like 20 plus or like almost legally able to drink is a big legality thing to me. So for me personally, if we changed it to be, you know, like 18, like starting at 18 to 25, because then also if you get a taste of DCI in high school, rather than feeling like this enormous pressure to like try to get this money to get in there as soon as you can and have years in it and whatever you can plan to save up for it, and then your senior year of high school or, you know, that transition period, you can go into DCI and have saved up for it, so that money aspect that we talked about earlier could be a little less of
a burden.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, and with that, you know, have the same rule apply, 18 to 25, and if you make the cut, you make the cut. Then you can march as many years as you want, you know, as long as you can afford it.
That's where I disagree. Like, I do agree they need to bring up the age limit because, like, you are in high school, you really need to focus on getting your primary education. And, like, DCI ultimately is a supplemental education, really, if you think about it that way. But when you expand it to such a large age group, then you also have to consider experience at that point. So, like, if you are a 25-year-old and you've marched since you were 18, a corps that selects only those people is always just going to sound better than a corps that takes all age groups. So I think having a larger age group from 18 to 25 allows that person to say, hey, I am mentally ready to march in DCI. But also set, hey, you only have 3 years of eligibility once, like, you start that. Like, maybe you marched when you're 18, and then you, like, whoa, I was a little too immature. Let me, like, take a gap year and then come back another year. So, like, I think that gives people a lot of options. And it also gives the corps a lot of options. Like, you don't have to, like, keep a ticking clock. You can just say, all right, you marched this year. You have, like, 2 more years within, you know, the next couple.
So it sounds like you're almost talking about college sports.
Yeah,
if you're
fine.
not, if you're varsity or if you're just a club sport, you only have X number of years eligibility.
Right.
I think currently it's 5 years eligibility.
Yeah.
So you've got, five different years you can participate in whatever sport you would like. So I kind of like that approach, putting somewhat of a time limit on it, and kind of following that model already.
Right. And I think with like the older people, you are more physically mature, and we know that like music is always trying to find that next level of physicality to like wow crowds, because like we're currently in like the triplet age, where like we
The triplet age?
I don't know, like instead of like like I don't know how to explain it correctly, but like the books for like the drum lines and whatnot is more faster pace than like back then. I'm pretty sure it's like in the triplet, like the heavy emphasis on the triplet like beat.
Oh, okay, I understand now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
like maybe soon, maybe 5 or 6 years, we audiences might be like, all right, we're done with triplets. Like we want something more. So like the book writers might be like, all right, I guess we have to move to like the sixlets, and then like you need people who are physically able to handle that, and I feel like moving that age group up would allow for more physicality.
Right, because you're building this idea off of the basis that young adults have incredible energy and resilience, but their bodies are literally still growing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and you will continue to grow until you're about 25. I think that's when your brain kind of stops doing all its things. But it's a lot
Your brain
of...
just stops when you turn 25.
You're done.
So I guess I'm done for. You're done for.
Yeah, I don't know how I've been going on
I don't know.
these past 2 years.
Your brain stops at 25. Heard it here, folks. You heard it here first. See, look, there we go. See, your brain's not working. You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah, I didn't think about it. What happens if you're a 14-year-old on tour and you make it, and then like you hit like a 4-inch growth spurt during the middle of tour? Like,
well, your uniform crew will have to change your uniform out, but it's just putting a lot of stress on your body.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that it's responsible for chorus to ask their members who are 15. I've marched with a 15-year-old who was incredibly mature for their age, who had to grow up a lot during tour, but I'm not sure that was the responsible thing of a corps to ask somebody, a young individual, was to put their body through all of that stress, and they ended up tearing their groin on both sides, because apparently you can tear it on both sides. Yeah. I did not know that. And they wrapped it up and continued to march through the pain.
Wow.
So
now they have to deal with that for like the rest of their life, because
I think it healed up, but
still, like it's not factory.
Not gonna be the same. It's not factory.
It's
not factory original. Oh man, yeah. Little known fact: all marching band members get a factory date. So your factory date is your first day of marching, and then you have a Best Buy date.
Yeah.
Oh no.
So,
but your idea is contrast kind of what I would think the best way to go about mark DCI and ages and everything. I would have DCI still open for everybody. Maybe more towards the younger folks, towards learning new skills, testing your body, just growing as a musician, and then have DCI reserved for people who were 15 to 20. And then have another, like a DCP.
Yeah.
A DCS, Drum Corps Senior program for the 21 through 25-year-olds. That way, I mean, you're kind of grouped more by development, right? And kind of your life experiences, and you guys can still share a lot of the same field and competitions and stuff, just be groups differently, because I think it's a big problem when you have people who can legally drink in the same bus around the same people, having the same conversations as people who are 15, 16 years old, because that's you're at different points in your life.
Yeah, you would never have
and
those conversations
different exposures.
in high school.
Yeah.
You can't go back to high school and like just hum it up with your high school friends and be like, oh wait, I can't talk about that stuff in school.
Right.
Well, also, I mean...
And it maybe would help broaden the horizon of the marching arts, not just being more publicly available on screens or cheaper, but it would just get a lot more people involved and into it, because it's really difficult to get into DCI with the whole barriers to entry of the ages, the money, the time. Can you travel for camps all winter long? So it's really difficult to do, and that would maybe make it easier.
Well, I can see that, but at the same time, we're assuming that in as of our conversation today, that we're going to be in a place where we can allocate those kinds of research, because to start a whole program, just one core is a lot. So now to be able to change the whole rule set of one set of core DCA, which is historically nowadays for people post DCI, or people who didn't make the DCI cut,
Right.
to now adding an entirely new organization. Now you have to fill that with cores to try to get stuff. And so I think it's a good idea in theory, but I think because currently where we're at, I don't think it's possible, because then
Well, I was thinking more like the Major League Baseball system, where you have like the
The
Major
minors,
League
yeah.
affiliate, and then you have the minor league affiliates, and so like maybe if there was like a whole streamlined system, because then like you could have practices where like, hey, we're bringing the younger kids up so they can get a little taste of life and see what like the next step is.
If you look at Blue Devils, they have
That's right.
3 cores.
Mm-hmm.
Because they've got their DCA core, and then they've got another one as well.
Right.
For education, learning purposes. So I think if we kind of bark up their tree and figure out how they're doing it, and is it working for them, and what their goals are, maybe that's replicatable throughout the country. Because drum corps started as just kind of kids wanting to do band and playing after school and organizing in churches and stuff. It started small. BAC, Boston Area Crusaders. That's what Boston stands for, right? And we've grown a lot since then, and so has everybody. But we've lost a lot of corps, like the Star of Indiana, because it's just kind of gone in this direction of now we're more like the NFL, and less like your local kids soccer team, if that makes sense. We've scaled everything up, and so maybe to expand, we would need to scale some of the cores down, as in maybe the DCP would be more localized and not go on a full-fledged tour and just be seen at a couple, like a home show and semis.
Here's, I guess, sort of a touchy subject. Like, how bad is it when people drop out in the middle of the season? Or is it not bad at all because you have alternates, just somebody who steps in?
It affects everybody. I mean, at the end of the day, talking about the show is one thing, but that's a friend. That's somebody that you cut up with every day. We had one of our trumpet players leave in the middle of the season because he had some stuff at home he had to go home and deal with. And, I mean, the whole corps felt that. And we were sad to see him go. His name was Mark. And we were, sad, like, hey, I'm so sorry, Mark, that this is your last stop. So at the end of the day, like, your community, you're tight-knit. And while you don't like everybody in your corps at all times, you become somewhat of a family going through this experience together. And so having alternates come in is really great. But even being an alternate, it's extra tough for alternates out there.
Right.
Because you've got to come in and learn someone else's spot and be just as good as they were, or be just as accurate, as say, in the show as they were, without getting 12 hours of rehearsal a day. You're there, you're marching, but it's not the same. Especially if you're an alternate who's like, I was just over there in trumpets being a trumpet for a month, and now I've got to go to mellophones and learn a completely different, way of doing things. Yeah.
Right.
So it's difficult, but corps adapt and people adapt, and it happens every year, and it's okay.
Okay. Yeah, because I feel like sometimes there can be a stigma around like people who do drop out, and so like, sorry, don't know what I'm trying to say. It's just like it's okay to drop out, and like life will move on as long as you have like a valid reason to, right?
Yeah, as long the sun will rise the next morning, the world will keep on spinning. It's gonna be a big deal for the individual, absolutely, to really consider dropping out and consider why. And if you go to drum corps and you do it and you're thinking about dropping out, the best thing to do is communicate. Say, hey, I'm actually having a really hard time here for these reasons, and maybe your staff or your section can help you with that. And that's just a conversation that's going to happen as, case by case. Let's say, like, you can't carry around your horn all day because it's too heavy. Then maybe switch out to a different horn, because they will test you and make you hold your horn up for a period of time, and your arms will shake, and you're going to say, this really hurts, this is a big stretch for me. But then you put your horn down and you get stronger at the end of the day.
Right.
So again, it's a huge challenge, but if you're up to it, it can teach you a lot of things about yourself.
Sorry, backing up a little bit, like, can you just explain alternates? Because, like, there are plenty of high school programs that just don't have alternates, because obviously, like, you're in high school, everybody should,
be marching. My
philosophy is that everybody should be marching, so, like, I guess, can you just explain alternates? So if, like, somebody is interested in DCI and they show up and, like, oh, there's things like alternates?
I think that's best explained by the corps, because every corps is going to have a different system for their alternates. But I think the general gist of being an alternate is you were good enough to make the horn line. Let's say 10 people auditioned, 10 people were good enough and they made it. And they only had 9 spots. So then you got one alternate. So that means if anything happens to the other 9 members who are on the field marching, then you get to jump in. And sometimes you get to do other things like hide behind a prop or move this stuff around or get this transition ready on the field, so you're not just like watching them every single time. But you are there for the whole summer. You might pay a reduced tuition, you might pay the full tuition. That's a core by core thing. And then you're there eating with everybody. You're practicing in the horn line with everybody. And you kind of have to learn a lot of different parts, in case
someone else not in your horn line could.
Right, not in your horn line.
March.
Exactly, not in the horn line or not in your section, or even just the first mellow is out this week. You need to jump in that spot. Okay, cool. So you're trained like everybody else with the music and the visual. You just might not always have a dot or be on the field for the performance.
So, like, what's that cutoff line between marching a hole in a show or, like, throwing an alternate in? Like, let's say, like, the morning of, somebody has, like, morning sickness and they just cannot march. Like, would you have an alternate or just have that hole?
Have that hole.
Okay.
I think it's unreasonable to ask somebody, hey, learn this entire show
in 6 hours.
In 6 hours. I mean, unless they're that good, in which case, like, hats off to you. But I think it's pretty unreasonable to try and have someone learn over 100 dots in a day.
So, like, you would say that corps do try to be reasonable, not like alternates. You should be available for any situation.
Right. They don't want to abuse people.
Right.
Let's say instead of, hey, this person's out for this show, can you jump in for this really small section? Just let's say the people are behind the props, so you jump in, march the rest of the act, and then they go back behind the props. There might be ways to fit them in and to get them to learn some dots and fill a hole, and maybe that person's out forever and that becomes their new dot or their new spot. But it's flexible.
Right.
It's like an amoeba.
Hey, shapes are hard, and that's why we do band, because somebody tells us how to make them.
Yeah. Wait, we make shapes. That's the hardest.
Yeah. No, but we pay somebody to make
tells
the shapes,
us how to make the shape.
We just follow their instructions.
Oh my goodness. But I'm curious to know something about, just in your band career, marching arts career. You've seen a lot of things, you've met a lot of people. What is, like, by far, if you can think of it, the most embarrassing thing that has happened to either you or to someone else that you have seen happen, if you can think of one?
We went to Disney, and we were going to play and do a little march and have the rest of the day free to enjoy Epcot. It's a great deal. Would do again. They run security checks on everyone coming into the park. And so we hadn't done laundry that week.
Oh, no.
So the two of us smelled disgusting. Absolutely terrible. It smelled so bad that the employee for Disney walked on the bus, like, did this. All right, you guys have anything bad to bring it in? And we said no. He said, okay, bye. And he could not complete his walkthrough and look through the bus like he was supposed to, because it smelled so bad he had to get off ASAP. We were burning his nose. And I was like, wow, it didn't smell that bad, does it? Apparently.
You get used to it. I mean, you get nose blind.
Absolutely, and that's really kind of sad, to be honest.
But I mean, understandable. You only do laundry every 2 weeks, so it's like, what can you do about it, right?
Sometimes we wash our clothes in the sink with little Tide Pods. You break them open, you
Don't
give them a
eat
little
those.
rub down, and you're good to go. Do not eat Tide Pods. They're not a snack.
They're not snacks. Oh my goodness. So, I mean, to we mentioned something earlier in our discussion. I mean, we talked about trying to bring more people in, appealing to more students, but like in today's day and age where everything is so electronic, everything's based on how well your social media presence is and how good your marketing team is. Right. I mean, how does DCI? I mean, how do they expand? How do they get more people to watch? Like, what would you think would bring more people? I mean, to me, I would think it'd be lower prices and an actual like broadcast. Like if there was a
it used to be on PBS from the 70s till the mid 2000s, and
then they stopped. So it, like
and now
a
it's
TV,
slow marching,
right?
Mm-hmm. But if they were like actually bring back like a more public access to seeing it and more like a even if it was just like that time between semis and finals and just did like a little short like series about it.
I mean, semis and finals is what, 24 hours?
This is like 24, 48 hours. But to be able to do a broadcast of both of those, less than that. Yeah. So, I mean, but even just doing the short time.
Yeah, just as Harrison saying, like, as somebody who marched DCI, what do you think that DCI corporate can do to better market DCI?
I think making it more accessible to the masses and not just having it be this niche thing, right? On flow marching, that's limiting. If you can put it back on PBS, just get it on screens out there. That'd be really, really neat. I think the price to entry too, tickets to competitions are expensive. The performers are paying a ton of money, which is incredibly, it creates a huge barrier to entry. Mm-hmm. For DCI, not everyone's got $4,000 to drop on 3 months. So I think there are a lot of barriers, but if you kind of look at just putting it on more screens, making things cheaper. I mean, I know your staff loves the sport and is almost volunteering their time, if not volunteering their time, to be there, and that love and that heart just needs to radiate through the corporate. Through the money. Yeah,
and the cheaper money to let more people in.
Well, I think they did a lot of good things with the broadcasting at movie theaters. That was really cool. I remember going to those before I did drum corps and after. I always try and catch them when they're in. So that's really good too. And some corps are really good at reaching out. I think Jersey Surf does a lot of volunteer work during the season as well, which is a great way to engage the community. Boston, we did a Boston Day, and we trying to outreach to at least a couple schools throughout the year and engage with their youth and just say, hey, band is really cool. This is what we're doing, and maybe try and inspire them to be better, because that's at the end of the day, band is it's about the community, but it's about being a part of something bigger than yourself, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you've got your your music, but you're on the field with everybody else creating this huge show, huge production, huge almost machine of movement. And that in itself can inspire you and inspire your audience, the people you're performing for.
Yeah, that's a good point, because, you're on this, like you said, it's a machine, but every cog has to work.
Absolutely.
You can't have one gear that has no actual rungs on it.
Yeah, if it's stripped, it's not going to do anything.
Right. So to kind of sum us up here with DCI and your experience just in band in general, I mean, can you give us like a little tagline? Just do you do DCI? Is it good, bad, or what is it?
It's ugly. Yeah. I think DCI is becoming a really great vehicle for young musicians to develop their talent and their skill, not only in the music side, but just building a better person, trying to be the best you can be, and really experiencing that being really skilled at something, really putting time and passion and a lot of hard work, blood, sweat, and tears into it can pay off. Because when you take band away, because you might not do band forever, when you take that away, you still have so much that you're left with, so many new skills that you've gained. So I think it is a really good vehicle, and I love the direction they're going in with making it less traditional and embracing more dance and just really other artsy aspects, including the controversial blue coat speakers, because there's a lot of speakers.
Yeah.
And the bus wars.
So with that, do you have anybody you want to shout out to, or any plugs, or anything about yourself? Anything exciting in your life, your personal life, you want to share?
I think it's really important for you to stand up for yourself and know your worth. I'm going through this journey where I recently quit a job in January, and I quit a job last month just because it wasn't working for me. It's not what I want to do long term. And I'm developing this vision of what I want to do long term, of like traveling and engaging with people and always learning and maybe trying to pass wisdom on. And I just realized that the jobs I had weren't getting me there. So
got to set yourself up for success.
Yeah, right? It's scary to be out in the world and trying to find your own way and be yourself and have your expressions and everything. Like if you want to wear a hat versus not wearing a hat. You know, just stuff like that. How do you express yourself?
Pro hat.
Very pro hat.
I want the record to show I am very pro hat.
So I think that band has really helped me, like, with the confidence and being like, it's okay to try new things, to take those risks, because I've done, I did DCI, and that's a cookie in my cookie jar, and when I need to have some energy and some motivation, I can take it out and eat it.
Motivation cookies, we like it.
And so, yeah, I'm excited to see what direction DCI goes in, and I'm really grateful to have been a part of it for the season I was, and all the auditions, because I learned a lot in my auditions. Even if you're not going to march, just audition. You're going to learn something. You're going to meet some cool people. And I still talk to a lot of the people I met at Boston Crusaders or in other corps as well. I still talk to them. I still have friends who have grown into being marathon runners now, or professional French horn players. If you want to learn anything about the French horn, Kate Warren is the woman to ask. She is incredibly knowledgeable and a really sassy and fun person. So I would recommend. I don't have any plugs. I'm on the internet. If you want to find me, Juliana Thomas 7 at Instagram.
There you go. That's a plug.
Yeah.
I guess it is a plug. I hike a lot, so if you want to see naturey things, go give my page a shout.
Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Like, I feel like we learned a lot, and just,
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to catch more of these, or ask us any questions, give us any feedback about, what you want to hear us talk about, you can find us anywhere, any social at Marching Arts Pod. Until next time.
Until next time. This has been your guide to all things marching.